Contentious battle is brewing in Dearborn over a mosque using outdoor loudspeakers for their call to prayer.
In Dearborn, Michigan, right here in the United States of America, a city that has become majority Arabic, about 55% of their population is Arabic. The religious figures are a little bit more difficult to pin down due to the fact that the census doesn't actually collect religious data, but we can assume a huge portion of that is an Islamic population. Residents who have lived there for a long time, Americans who have been there for generations, are getting woken up at 5:30 in the morning, and by the way, all hours of the day, due to the fact that a local mosque is playing on the loudspeaker an Islamic call to prayer. That's right, here in the United States of America, the so-called secular republic that we are, residents who live in and around a mosque have to be greeted each and every morning with this obnoxious Islamic call to prayer because, of course, once Muslims get to a certain percentage, once they get to a majority, they start reshaping society around them in order to cater to their religious beliefs, and they completely discard the host country that they're in. And this is what we're going to talk about today, because the local news media adds a little bit of ambiguity to the situation. They try to say, well, there's an argument from this side and there's an argument from that side, but in reality, when you actually look at the legislation in question, when you actually see what's going on and you hear the complaints from the regular, ordinary, non-Islamic residents of this area, what you find out is that they're 100% right, the mosque is 100% wrong, and there have already been extreme measures taken in order to calm this nonsense down. However, the Muslims are not interested in complying because, again, when they're in the minority, they ask for freedom because that's according to your values, but when they're in the majority, they rule over you and take away freedom because that's according to their values. And this is what we're going to talk about today. But before we do, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
I spoke to the director of the Dearborn Community Center. This is the mosque being criticized for the use of its loudspeaker for its call to prayer. The director tells me this has been an ongoing complaint from a small minority in the community, and he insists no rules are being broken.
Yeah, this is crazy. We don't want to bother anybody.
So they open up with a guy over at the mosque and he says, look, we don't want to bother anyone. We're not trying to infringe on anybody's morning. We're just trying to peacefully practice our religion in Dearborn, Michigan. And in reality, in actuality, the implication of what this guy's saying is that there's some Islamophobia going on. And what you really need to do is shut up with your Islamophobia. Now, unlike many other creators who talked about the previous story out of Dearborn, Michigan, where the mayor of Dearborn told a Christian resident that he was not allowed to be in Dearborn, that he was unwelcome there, that he was a racist Islamophobe. Let me play that for you right here.
The best suggestion I have for you is to not drive on Warren Avenue, or to close your eyes while you're doing it. His name is up there, and I spoke at a ceremony celebrating it because he's done a lot for this community. And I think it's quite hypocritical to know that you're approaching this podium when you yourself have videos on YouTube standing in front of my mosque saying the cruelest of things about Muslims, about the religion of Islam, because you are a bigot and you are a racist and you are an Islamophobe. And although you live here, I want you to know as mayor, you are not welcome here. And the day you move out of the city will be the day that I launch a parade celebrating the fact that you moved out of the city. Because you are not somebody who believes in coexistence. You're somebody who tries to preach it, but in fact you do everything but that. So I just want to put that on the record.
Rather than just rely on the characterization of the local news report, I actually went to the Dearborn City Council YouTube page, pulled the entire interaction, and what I found out in that particular case is what made this person an Islamophobe was that he actually brought quotes of the person that he was criticizing that they decided to name a street after. And included in those quotes was this person calling for Muslims to fight absolutely everywhere in the world, including Michigan, fight with knives, fight with fists, fight with planes, which clearly and obviously was a call to violence.
Okay, well, I mean, I'm just reading his words here.
That's fine, but you're interpreting his words after you read them. He did not use the word violence, did he?
Well, may I continue the rest of the quote?
Well, if you say you want to read them, you can read them. If you want to interpret and give your own opinion of what he's thinking, that's a different story.
Okay. Sure. I mean, I'd love to discuss this. I just want to finish the quote because this is more. Okay, I'll continue. Whether we are in Michigan and whether we are in Jenin, believe me, everyone should fight within his means. They will fight with stones, others will fight with guns, others will fight with planes, drones, and rockets, others will fight with their voices, and others will fight with their hands and say, free, free Palestine. So I just find it very concerning.
And by the way, it was not just the mayor in that particular instance that went after this resident, this local Christian in and around this area. It was actually other members of the city council who told him that while he was allowed to read quotes from the person who, again, they've named a street after, he wasn't actually allowed to characterize those quotes as a call for violence, because in reality, in actuality, when you have this many Muslims controlling your city council, your rights to freedom of speech only are in effect when you're criticizing other people, and definitely not Muslims. Now, none of that was included in the local news media report that covered that previous story, so I thought it would be smart of me to pull the actual section of this particular city council meeting so we can get the full interaction. And what we actually hear is that despite what the local news is trying to portray about a community looking for compromise, about this being a back and forth, but in reality, probably the Muslims aren't doing anything, and in reality there's probably some Islamophobia going on right in Dearborn, Michigan, maybe some evil white racism. What we discover is that the city council fully admits that they've already taken extreme measures in order to address the noise problems. However, they refuse to stop blasting this prayer at 5:30 in the morning.
I've been coming to the Federation, the committee, and the council meetings for 2 years now to address the enforcement of the noise ordinance, which states it is unlawful to permit unreasonably loud, disturbing, unusual, unnecessary noise, which a noise disturbs, injures, or endangers the comfort, repose, health, peace, or safety of others within the limits of the city. 2 years ago, a council member sought to change the noise ordinance to permit the mosque to use loudspeakers to play the call to prayer multiple times daily. This change was not passed at the council meeting, but the mosques in East Dearborn are now at times waking us up at 5:30 in the morning with the call to prayer, and at other times forcing us to listen to the prayer in our yard and in our own home. With our signed petition, my neighbors and I are asking for the respect to live peacefully in our own homes, as no permission was given by the city council to allow outdoor playing of the call to prayer. For the last 40 years, the call to prayer was either indoors, or at times it was printed, or it was on the app. What changed that they felt permission was given? The noise complaints have been made out, and the police have made numerous visits.
As I've said multiple times, there is no change in ordinance for any religion, for any noise ordinance to do whatever they want or amplify sound and impede on someone else's life and enjoyment of their property, which I've been consistent for 3 years with you on that. So I totally agree with you, and we have found instances where they have violated it, and we have been going there, so on and so forth. So we're going to have to come with a resolve that's going to be final. As you know, as I spoke at the last meeting, the officers went there, marked a mark for the level of the volume on the unit, took the knob off.
So think about how absurd what you just heard right there actually is. According to the Muslim member of the city council, again, somebody who's trying to minimize the situation, somebody who is totally on board with targeting a random citizen in the previous city council meeting, they've actually addressed this in multiple different and including extreme ways, like sending law enforcement to these local mosques, having them actually break off the dial for the volume on the loudspeaker so that these people can't turn it up, because despite the fact that they've given them warning after warning for years, they actually have not done it. So obviously, this is very much an extreme problem in Dearborn, Michigan. They've had to take all these different measures in order to address it, and whether or not this is a violation of their noise ordinance, to me, is not even worth talking about, because it's so clearly it's so clearly a violation that there's no conversation nor debate to be had about this, because while there are limits during the daytime hours of how loud, and thus that becomes a question of the decibel levels of this particular loudspeaker during the day, between the hours of 10 p.m. and 7 a.m., you actually can't play these loudspeakers at all. So there's 0 decibel level that is acceptable from these speakers, and yet the regular ordinary residents of Dearborn, Michigan are greeted with Islamic calls to prayer at 5:30 in the morning. Last time I checked, and again, I'm not a scientist, I've never been an expert on nuclear physics, 7 a.m. is actually later than 5:30 a.m., therefore, this should be a violation, and yet it is still years in a debate. It's still years in played as this both sides issue on the local news media, when in reality, it's anything but a both sides issue. It's exactly an issue of Islamic populations deciding that the rules don't apply to them, that Islam takes precedent over absolutely everything, and that is what the regular ordinary residents of Dearborn, Michigan are experiencing. And again, when you look at their mayor, the guy who says you're not welcome here if you criticize Islam, who can be surprised that these people feel emboldened in Dearborn, Michigan?
But the mosques in East Dearborn are now at times waking us up at 5:30 in the morning with a call to prayer.
This is Dearborn resident Andrea Unger at last night's city council meeting, stating that mosques using outdoor loudspeakers for their call to prayer should not be allowed, and says she believes it's not supposed to be allowed per city ordinance.
The noise complaints have been made out and the police have made numerous visits. What is the next step?
Council President Mike Serini during the meeting pointed out that police have investigated and gathered decibel tests from certain mosques. Nabil Bahalwan, the director of the Dearborn Community Center, says police visited his site and was told his loudspeaker was not too loud.
And then the city came in, the inspector. There is a monitoring for the voice. We are even below the average of the rules.
But again, at last night's city council meeting, there was some question whether or not any outdoor loudspeakers are allowed, something that was not clarified.
Again, this is why it's extraordinarily important for you guys to actually pull up these local meetings, actually look up the interaction in question, because they paint it to be like some kind of investigation that's ongoing. And honestly, like the guy who's at the mosque says, oh, we're actually below the average of the noise level, so therefore it's up in the air. But in reality, the ordinance that covers noise goes from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m., so it's not even an issue of decibel levels at that point in time. And in addition to that, there was a specific motion at the Dearborn City Council in order to exempt Islamic cultural centers or mosques from playing their loudspeaker call to prayer, and that was voted down.
But again, at last night's city council meeting, there was some question whether or not any outdoor loudspeakers are allowed, something that was not clarified.
As I've said multiple times, there is no change in ordinance for any religion, for any noise ordinance to do whatever they want or amplify sound and impede on someone else's life.
So this is completely not permitted. And again, it is religiously neutral. This applies to churches who don't engage in such nonsense most of the time, and any other kind of religious institution. However, there's one institution that has decided that they take precedent over absolutely everything. There's one religion in this particular area that thinks that the laws and rules don't apply to them. And again, they've been emboldened by their mayor in order to believe that.
Only that more evidence is being gathered, but CBS Detroit did examine Dearborn's noise ordinance and found that loudspeakers between the hours of 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. are in violation of the ordinance. Meantime, Bahalwan says he does not believe this mosque is violating any ordinance. However, he is concerned that some residents aren't happy.
Again, why is CBS Detroit framing it this way? Why are they talking about an investigation and whether or not this was allowed when there was a specific law that was up for a vote that would have allowed this, and guess what? It was voted down. The answer to this question, obviously, from this very interaction is no. However, CBS is sprinkling a lot of ambiguity on it as if we don't understand exactly what's going on. And here's the crazy thing about all of this. The Muslim population in the United States of America, and I can't speak to Dearborn specifically because, again, they've gotten to a majority and obviously things change above a certain percentage, is like the best Muslim population in any Western country. If you compare them to the UK or France or whatever what you find out is that we have a much more chill, much more moderate Muslims. And honestly, if you go to a regular, ordinary Muslim neighborhood like in New York, chances are you'll have a good time. Chances are you'll meet some friendly people. Chances are you will feel like, okay, I'm basically in the Arabic version of Little Italy. So, it's not really that big of a deal. But as we see, even in the United States of America, even when we have like an assimilation mindset better than actually in Europe, what we find out is when you get above a certain population, things start changing before your eyes. The country starts getting remade, or at least the local area starts getting remade. And obviously, you are called bigot and racist and Islamophobic if you decide not to like it. A perfect example of this is Minnesota's flag was essentially changed to mimic the Somali flag. We also have everything going on in Dearborn, Michigan. And in addition to that, in this very city of Dearborn, Michigan, during a pro-Palestinian march, the Muslim population in Dearborn, Michigan decided to drop all pretenses about this being about Palestinian statehood and started chanting "Death to America," again, in the United States of America, in Michigan, in the place where we're actually among the best at assimilating people. It's gotten this bad. And by the way, I just want to point out for everybody out there in the audience that while we're talking about Minneapolis, a little Mogadishu, while we're talking about Dearborn, Michigan, again, the Arabian Peninsula in the United States of America, there's actually a burgeoning Pakistani community that is taking over a huge part of Texas. So make no mistake about it, this is starting to be a problem that spreads. And while we have a much larger population in the United States of America, and we don't have a direct line to import all of these Islamicists into our country, make no mistake about it, this slow-moving takeover is happening on a local level, not a national level like we see in many places in Europe. And yes, it is producing similar problems. Now, with all that being said, I want to know what you guys think about this down in the comments below. What do you think about the loudspeaker issue in Dearborn, Michigan? What do you think about the fact that the local news media decided to make this far more ambiguous than it actually was portrayed in the city council meeting, where you actually had the council member be very conciliatory toward the resident that's complaining about this, even though, again, this has been an ongoing problem for years that they're not really addressing? Again, all your thoughts down in the comments below. As per usual, if you liked the video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on my social medias, support me via support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about the Islamic takeover of Dearborn, Michigan. Till next time.